This happened just a few nights ago. I had just moved into my cottage at the edge of town. I thought it would be a perfect quiet spot to write my next article. The charming houses around me felt full of stories. I wanted to uncover them all. On my third night, I was typing away, getting into a rhythm. Everything seemed normal until I heard faint thuds coming from the walls. At first, I thought it was just the old pipes making sounds. Maybe they were settling? But something about it didn't feel right. I just brushed it off, but I knew I wasn't alone. The next day, I decided to dig into the history of my house. It wasn't anything too alarming, just a few odd tenants here and there. I felt a strange mix of curiosity and unease as I read. But those noises didn't stop. They grew louder each night. That night, I decided to explore the house. I moved slowly from room to room. I found hidden compartments in the walls filled with old letters, a child's toy, and faded family photos. Who had lived here? What had happened to them? I placed the items aside, a knot forming in my stomach. I tried to push the thoughts away. It was just a house, I told myself. But by the time night fell, everything changed. I was in bed, struggling to keep my eyes open. The shadows in my room began to shift. I thought it was just my imagination, but deep down, I felt uneasy. The air grew cold. I heard whispers, so soft I could barely make sense of them. It sounded like two people talking. I held my breath, trying to listen. Then something tapped against the wall right next to me. I froze. My heart raced as chills spread across my body. I wanted to scream, to call out. But I couldn't make a sound. I just listened. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking, what was hidden behind those walls? The next day I looked like a mess. Tired and scared, I fought to convince myself it was just my imagination. But the noises were there again, even louder. I wondered if I should leave, but the pull to the mystery kept me there. I felt like I needed to confront whatever was going on. I stood there, fear rising in my throat as I prepared to face the noise. Then I heard it again, clearer this time. Someone spoke my name. My pulse quickened. The air was thick, almost electric. I found myself frozen in place. I didn't know if I was ready to find out what was on the other side of the walls. Who or what was reaching out to me? What were the stories buried in my cottage? And as I stood there, the shadows grew darker. I realized I had to know. I had to confront the voices calling me in the dark. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. The voice had been so clear, so familiar. Was it someone who had lived here? I grabbed a flashlight and moved cautiously toward the wall where I had heard my name. The whispers intensified, dancing around me like a chilling breeze. I aimed the beam of light at the wall, searching for any sign of what lay behind. I traced the edges where the paint chipped away, feeling an odd mix of dread and anticipation. My hand brushed against a small wooden panel that felt different, looser, like it had been disturbed recently. Suddenly the thuds returned, louder this time, as if something was trying to escape from the other side. I startled, taking a step back. My heart raced. "What do you want?" I called out, my voice shaking. I didn't expect an answer. The noise stopped abruptly. Silence filled the room, and for a moment I wondered if I had imagined the sound. But then, a soft voice emerged from the wall. "Help us." My stomach dropped. The pleading tone sent chills through me. Who was trapped? The need to understand overwhelmed my fear. I pressed my ear against the panel, trying to decipher more of the voice. But the whispers faded again, leaving only the sound of my breath. I knew I had to act. I grasped the edge of the panel, pulling at it with all my strength. It creaked, hesitating before finally giving way. The wood splintered, and a narrow hole appeared. Darkness yawned behind it, beckoning me closer. I hesitated. This was more than I had bargained for. What if it was a trap? What if something was waiting for me on the other side? But the urgency in the voice rang in my ears. I couldn't turn back now. With a final push, I wedged the panel open wider, revealing a dark space behind it. The air felt heavier, tinged with a dampness that sent a shiver down my spine. I aimed my flashlight inside, illuminating a small, cramped cavity, littered with dust and cobwebs. That's when I saw it. A series of letters, yellowed and crumbling, scattered around the space. They looked like they had been there for decades. I knelt down, my hands trembling as I picked one up, trying to make sense of the scribbled words. Then, I heard it again. The soft whispering, rising around me from the walls, urging me to understand. But before I could read any further, I heard a noise behind me, a creak of the floorboards upstairs. I froze. Someone was in the house. Panic surged through me. I couldn't turn around, couldn't make a sound. I felt the shadows pressing down, closing in around me. I'd opened a door I didn't fully understand, and now something was watching me from just beyond the threshold of light. Questions flooded my mind. Who was up there? What had I exposed myself to? I needed to find out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lurked in the dark was not ready to be revealed. The creaking grew louder, an ominous reminder that whatever was upstairs was moving closer. My heart raced, and the flashlight trembled in my hand as I pointed it toward the hole I had just opened. I could still hear the whispers, but they now felt like a distant echo against the sudden reality of my intruder. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to bolt from this house and never look back. But curiosity kept my feet rooted to the spot. I needed to know what was happening. I glanced back at the letters scattered around me. The urge to read them was strong, but any lingering calm dissolved as the floorboards creaked again, this time accompanied by a soft thud. I looked up toward the ceiling. "Hello?" The question slipped from my mouth, barely a whisper. There was no response, just the sound of something dragging across the floor above. I felt a mixture of fear and fury. This was my search. I wouldn't let anyone else take my moment of discovery. With shaky hands I retrieved another letter, smudged ink revealing the faint outline of a name. Evelyn. My throat tightened as I spoke the name, only to find it swallowed by the surrounding darkness. I turned to the wall once more, desperate to find the connection between these letters and the voices that had beckoned me. Suddenly the whispers escalated, swirling around me in a cacophony. "Help! Us!" The plea morphed into a chorus that filled the cramped space. I pressed my hands against my ears, trying to block out the sound. But they persisted. This was not just a call for help. It felt like a warning. "Get out!" I shouted, half in anger and half in fear. The words only fueled the noise, and for a moment, I thought the walls themselves might crack apart. Determined, I moved further into the cavity, thrusting the flashlight beam around the space. There had to be more than just these letters. Just beyond where light touched, the darkness loomed ominously. The air felt ripe with anticipation. I reached for another letter, but my fingers landed on something cold and metallic instead. I pulled it closer. A locket. It was tarnished with age, the surface etched with intricate designs. I swung the flashlight onto it and everything seemed to freeze. Just then, the dragging noise stopped above me. My pulse thundered in my ears. I turned, the locket clutched tightly in my hand. "Who's there?" I called out again, my voice faltering. A chill swept through the air as a figure stepped into the threshold of the flashlight's glow. It was a shadow, indistinct but there. Just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, swallowed by the deep darkness. My heart sank. No longer could I hear the whispers, replaced by the chilling silence of what had just left. Fear clawed at my throat. I realized I was now in a treacherous balance. I knew I was entangled in something that went beyond me, the voices of the past, and now a presence in the house. Without thinking, I turned on my heel and sprinted for the hole I created. The fear of being trapped here with what I had just glimpsed drove me forward. But as I reached the opening, I felt something grip my shoulder, cold and unyielding. Just as I was about to scream, everything went black. I stumbled back into consciousness, the world waking up around me like a heavy fog lifting. For a moment, I lay still, disoriented. My heart was still pounding, and the memory of that cold grip lingered like ice on my skin. I slowly forced myself to sit up, the light of my flashlight illuminating the cramped space. I was back in the cavity, but it felt different now. I could hear faint noises outside my hideout, soft whispers in the distance. They were less frantic this time, almost melodic, as if beckoning me to listen closely. I shook my head, clearing the debris of apprehension. I pressed my fingertips against my shoulder where the grip had sent chills down my spine. Was it a figment of my imagination, or was something really lurking? I lifted the locket from where I had dropped it, studying it again under the glint of light. Whatever I had found before, whatever presence I had encountered, still felt palpable. The designs were familiar, almost like the ones etched onto the old furniture in the house. I needed answers. I crawled deeper into the cavity, following the whispers that seemed to guide me. They wrapped around me, pulling me forward. I could feel the air thickening, the atmosphere changing with each inch I moved. Then I spotted another letter tucked into a crevice. My hands trembled as I reached for it, certain that within it lay some secret I desperately needed to unravel. But as I pulled it free, a loud bang echoed from above like thunder rolling through the house. I froze, my heart racing once more. Whatever was up there was awake, and it was angry. The whispers turned to frantic shouts in my mind. "Leave! Now!" Panicking, I backtracked towards the opening I had crawled through when I had first arrived. I felt the weight of my decision settling on my shoulders. Was I about to be discovered? Just as I approached the exit, the darkness stirred again, this time more pronounced. A figure emerged, casting a long shadow down the passageway. It was no longer just a fleeting form, but a solid presence, taking shape in the dim light. The shivering whispers crescendoed into a haunting chant. "Help us!" I grabbed the flashlight tighter, ready to shine it at the figure. But what I saw left me paralyzed. The face that stared back at me was impossibly hollow, eyes dimmed by a darkness that felt alive. I felt sick with fear, wanting to recoil. But behind me, the open hole to freedom seemed to shrink away. The apparition hovered closer, an echo stretching across the small space. "We need you," it croaked, its voice weaving into the air like smoke. I was trapped between the darkness and my urge to flee. Suddenly something crashed above, a heavy sound that rattled the walls. I stumbled back, tumbling into the cavity's recess. I dropped the flashlight, its beam flickered, and finally gave out. In that moment, darkness flooded my vision. Panic rose in my throat. That's when I remembered the letters. I scrambled to find them, desperately reaching into the folds of the air where the shadows formed. I had to uncover the truth before it consumed me. As my fingers brushed against paper, dread wrapped around me. "What happened to you?" I whispered into the void, unsure of whom I was speaking to. I felt it, a presence pushing me to dig deeper. And that was when I heard it again, louder than before. Someone, or something, was in the house. I dared not move. The darkness felt alive, thick and suffocating around me as I strained to listen. The whispers morphed into a chorus, a disjointed melody of voices tangled together, each pleading in desperation. The air grew colder, chilling my bones, as dread seeped deeper into my veins. I felt around blindly for the letters I had grasped moments earlier. My fingers found their crinkled edges. With tremorous hands, I dragged them closer, the papery surface not enough to anchor me in reality. I opened the first one, reading the words hastily scribbled in a shaky hand. "Help us find peace." The echoes linger. "We are trapped." A knot tightened in my stomach. What had I stumbled upon? The words pressed against my mind, melding with the frantic sounds vibrating all around. I forced myself to breathe, fighting the urge to scream. Finding out more had to be worth the risk. I reached for the next letter, my pulse quickening. "They'll know if you linger too long," it began. I couldn't decipher who they referred to, but the warning was clear. I needed to hurry. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed from above me, a branch breaking, or someone stepping heavily on the floor. I froze again, every muscle in my body urging me to run. But where would I go? The figure still hovered in my mind, unyielding and hauntingly real. Ignoring the panic, I forced myself to focus on the last letter. It had to hold something vital. "Escape through the shadows," it read. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as the meaning sank in. The shadows were alive here. I could feel it, the walls, the floor, everything pulsated with energy. That's when I heard it again. a soft footfall from the entry point. Someone was indeed in the house, and they were getting closer. I felt trapped, caught between voices, trapped in the walls, and the very real danger looming above. As my heart raced, I made a decision. I wouldn't wait for whatever was stalking me to find me. I had to act. But how? As I peered into the dark cavity around me, I felt the urge to lean into the shadows, almost as if they were calling me. I looked carefully around for any hollow spaces, any possible routes to escape. My breath hitched in my throat when I noticed a slight indentation in the wall just ahead. It was almost hidden, but I could see a seam running along the edges. Could it lead to what I hoped for? I inched toward it, half expecting to be grabbed by another cold grip. Just as I reached out, the sound of a heavy thud echoed from above, causing the walls to vibrate, rattling the letters out of my grasp. They fluttered away into the darkness. I cursed under my breath. There was no time to waste. With barely a thought, I pushed against the indentation. The false wall creaked and slowly gave way, revealing a narrow opening. I felt a rush of air that held whispers of freedom. But just then, I heard a voice, low and brooding. "Don't go." "Not yet." I hesitated, knowing something was very wrong. What else awaited me beyond that passage? But the figure, the voices, they all seemed to close in fast. "Help us!" they called again, desperate. With my heart in my throat, I stepped inside. The moment I stepped into the opening, the air shifted around me. It was as if the shadows themselves wrapped around me, pulling me further into their embrace. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for me to turn my shoulders. I hesitated again, but the sounds above urged me on. I moved deeper into the darkness, my hands brushing against the damp surface of the walls. It felt cool against my skin, grounding me even as my mind raced with fear. The whispers grew faint, swallowed by the depth of the space. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that someone or something was lingering just out of sight. I walked on, trying to keep my breathing steady. Suddenly a sound broke the silence, a soft skittering like nails on a chalkboard. I froze, heart pounding. My instincts screamed for me to turn around, to run back to where I came from. But the thought of whatever had been above me drove me onward. Then I saw it, faint light flickering in the distance. I approached cautiously, warily moving closer until the light revealed a small, dimly lit room. There were more letters scattered across the ground, their edges curled and yellowed with age. I knelt to pick one up, feeling a sense of dread wash over me as I read the faded ink. "Beware the Watchers. They dwell in the dark." My stomach lurched. Who were the Watchers? The words seemed to pulse ominously, echoing in my mind. The last thing I needed was another hint of danger, but I quickly brushed aside my fear. The urgency to uncover the mystery drove me. Another letter caught my eye. "They never leave. They only wait." Just then, a door creaked open at the far end of the room and I froze again. Whoever, whatever, was in the house above. I had a feeling they weren't the only ones. The flickering light grew intense for a moment, illuminating twisted figures along the wall. They looked like shadows given form, stretching and shifting as if reaching for me. I tried to back away, but the exit I had come from was now hidden in darkness. Panic clawed at my throat. I couldn't be trapped here. I had to make sense of this, find a way out, but I also needed answers. I noticed a small stack of papers piled against the wall. I went over and started reading, desperate for context. They were notes, each one detailing strange occurrences in the house. People reported hearing voices, feeling watched, and some claimed to have seen shapes moving in the corners of their vision. One note, scribbled frantically, caught my attention. "It feeds on fear. If you show it weakness, it will claim you." That realization hit me like a cold wave. The entity in the house wasn't just a presence. It thrived on the terror of those trapped within. I looked around, feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon me, expecting some grotesque figure to emerge from the dark. But instead, the shadows seemed to shiver. I felt as though they were communicating in hushed tones. The whispers returned, growing louder, spiraling into a cacophony. "Join us. Stay with us." I clutched one of the letters tighter, determination igniting inside me. I wouldn't be another victim. Whatever danger lay ahead, I had to face it head on. Then, just as I steeled myself to push forward, the flickering light extinguished. Darkness enveloped me and the whispers turned hostile. They clawed at my sanity, desperation mingling with my fear. I had no idea what was coming next, but as my heart raced, I could feel the shadows closing in around me. I waited in the darkness, caught in a trap of my own making. Panic surged as the whispers thickened around me. "Join us! Stay with us!" The words pulsed in my ears, urging me to surrender. I shook my head, trying to push the suffocating voices away. I needed to move. The fear had to become fuel. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I couldn't let whatever was in this dark space claim me. I had to find a way out. I fumbled in the darkness, my hands brushing against the walls, desperate for something solid to guide me. As I stepped forward, I felt a slight breeze, a hint of fresh air that promised a way out. I turned towards it, hope flickering in my chest. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from behind me, sending jolts of terror through my body. I spun around, heart racing. What was that? I strained my eyes in the shadows, but saw nothing. Just darkness closing in. With a renewed sense of urgency, I walked in the direction of the breeze. Each step was careful. The ground was uneven, strewn with debris and remnants of the past. I had to be cautious. The last thing I wanted was to trip and fall into whatever was lurking just out of view. Then, just as I felt a surge of relief wash over me from the air before the opening, a low growl vibrated from the shadows. My stomach twisted. I knew right then that I wasn't alone. There was something, maybe more than one thing, stepping into the light's edge. My pulse quickened. I turned and bolted in the opposite direction, panic overriding my instincts. The growl followed, a guttural sound that reverberated through the darkness. I sprinted down the narrow passage, desperate to escape. The whispers transformed into shrieks, escalating as if they sensed my fear. Behind me, I heard movement, something skittering rapidly. It was gaining on me. I felt the suffocating presence of the shadows closing in. I had no choice but to keep pushing forward, even as I doubted if I could escape. Finally, I stumbled into a small room, my breath hitching in my throat. The corners were filled with a thick dark mist, swirling ominously. On the far wall, a cracked mirror reflected what little light had seeped through. I glanced at it and nearly jumped back. A figure stood behind me, its face twisted, a dark silhouette half-formed from the shadows. My heart raced and I stumbled away from the mirror, pressing against the wall. There it was, the essence of fear materialized before me. "Leave. Now," it hissed, its voice like 1,000 insects buzzing in unison. I felt icy fingers graze my neck and I shuddered, terror pushing me toward the exit I had felt earlier. Suddenly I remembered the notes. What if the answer was already here, in this room? I scanned the walls, looking for something, anything. That was when I noticed a small piece of paper stuck in a crack. I ripped it free, my hands trembling. It was another note. "They hide in reflections. The Watchers feast on your misery." The message hit me hard. It was the Watchers, the same ones that had lingered in every report I'd read. Every warning echoed in my mind. They weren't just eyes in the dark. They were here to claim me. Before I could process the implications, the shadows shifted again and the figure advanced. "You belong to us," it growled. The weight of impending darkness pressed in from all sides. I had to escape, but one question lingered. Where was the exit? With every ounce of strength, I darted toward a gap near the floor, hoping it led somewhere safe. As I squeezed through, the last thing I heard was an unearthly wail echoing behind me. I had escaped for now, but something told me the shadows were far from finished. As I crawled into the unknown, I realized I had only begun to uncover the horrors of this house. The floor beneath me felt rough and cold as I wriggled through the narrow gap. Light flashed ahead, drawing me toward it. I reached out, grasping for anything that might help me pull myself through. I finally reached the other side and tumbled into the next room, landing hard on the ground. Blinking against the light, I took in my surroundings. I was in what looked like an old storage space, filled with boxes, cobwebs, and forgotten treasures. The sunlight came from a small window high on the wall, illuminating dust motes swirling in the air. I sat up slowly, trying to steady my breath, but the relief was short-lived. The whispers returned, lingering at the edges of my mind, taunting me. They were far from gone. I needed to find a way to escape this maze before whatever lurked in the darkness could recognize my scent. I got to my feet, heart still pounding. My eyes scanned the room for a way out, but everything felt high and out of reach. That was when I noticed an unusual box, larger than the rest, partially hidden behind a stack of old furniture. I approached it, feeling drawn to it despite my instinct to steer clear of anything left behind in this house. As I brushed off the dust, my hand grazed across a twisted symbol etched into the wood. It looked vaguely familiar, something I had seen in the notes I'd collected. Carefully, I opened the box, muttering to myself for courage. Inside lay a series of shadowy objects, dolls, old photographs, and what looked like a diary. I flipped through the pages and my skin crawled with each entry. It was a chronicle of strange occurrences, just like the ones I had read about before. "They hear the calls," one entry stated. "They hide in the walls, waiting to drag you into their game." My breath hitched. The watchers were not just a warning. They were a reality, a living nightmare contained in each word. Suddenly, a sound erupted from the corner of the room. I spun around, pulse quickening. It was a skittering noise, something small but fast. My heart raced as shadows crept along the edges, dark figures emerging from the cracks in the walls. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the box. I had to get out. Panic surged through me once again. I noticed a door on the far side of the storage room. It was slightly ajar, and I could see a faint light spilling from the crack. With no time to think, I bolted for it, unsure of what awaited me on the other side. As I reached for the handle, a cold breath brushed against my neck. "Stay with us," it whispered. I didn't stop to respond. I threw the door open and dashed through, locking it behind me. On the other side, I found myself in a narrow hallway. The walls were lined with more mirrors, each one reflecting distorted versions of myself. I could feel the watchers lurking beyond those reflections. I had to keep moving. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something in one of the mirrors. A figure standing behind me, grinning. My heart sank as realization hit. I was entrapped, and they were getting closer. I ran down the hallway, adrenaline coursing through me. I had to survive. Somehow I needed to confront the fear that had taken root in this house. But as the whispers grew louder, I felt it tightening around me. Then everything went dark. The cold swallowed me, and as I struggled to find my footing, I realized I was not alone in the dark again. I blinked, trying to adjust to the darkness. It surrounded me like a heavy blanket, and the silence was almost deafening. I could feel the presence again, lurking just beyond my reach. I took a deep breath and forced myself to focus, reminding myself that panic wouldn't help me escape whatever this was. Then I heard it, a soft rustle to my right. I turned, squinting to see if anything emerged from the shadows. My heart raced. "Hello?" I called, my voice shaky. No response, just that eerie stillness. I stepped forward cautiously, feeling my way along the wall. My fingers brushed against something cool and solid, and I gasped as I recognized the texture of brick. This was a wall, but it felt like it was closing in. I needed to find a way out. Somehow, there had to be a way to the surface, to the light. My foot slipped on something beneath me. I stumbled but caught myself. I crouched down, my hands searching the ground until I found it. A small, rough stone. I held it up to the faintest remnants of light, seeing it glimmer slightly. Maybe it could be a weapon or a tool, something to help me. I took a few more steps, the whispers starting to grow again, wrapping around me like a sinister vine. I felt my throat tighten as I realized they were not just sounds, they formed words. "Come play with us," they hissed. Each syllable crawled beneath my skin. Desperation surged within me. I couldn't let them lure me back. If I succumbed, I'd become another lost soul trapped in this wake of terror. "No!" I shouted into the void, my voice echoing in the silence. "I won't play your game." Suddenly I felt something grasp my ankle. I yelped, instinctively kicking out with my foot. The grip loosened, but in that instant, a shadow darted past me. My skin prickled with fear. "Who's there?" I demanded, though my voice was barely above a tremor. Another rustle came, this time followed by soft laughter. It was high-pitched, playing with the dark like a child. I pressed myself against the wall, my pulse roaring in my ears. I needed a way out. I couldn't let them play me like a pawn. I focused again, moving quickly toward where I sensed the greatest density of shadow. Maybe there would be a crack, a hidden space I could slip through. I felt along the wall and found a barely noticeable indentation. My heart leaped. This might be it. I pushed against it, bracing myself for potential resistance. The darkness shifted, and it felt like a tug of war with an unseen force. I pressed harder, my breath coming in quick bursts. Then the wall gave slightly and I could see a sliver of light peeking through. My chest tightened with hope, but just as quickly the laughter grew louder, surrounding me on all sides, taunting me, buying time to pull me back. I gritted my teeth and pushed harder, and that's when I heard the rumble of voices, not just whispers. They had multiplied, rising in volume, feeding off my fear. "Stay with us. Stay eternally." The crack widened and I felt a rush of cold air slap my face. I couldn't hesitate anymore. I shoved my body against the opening, forcing my way through, anticipation mixed with dread. And just as I thought I had broken free, a hand shot out from the shadows. It brushed against my arm with icy fingers dragging me back. I screamed. Everything turned chaotic, dark shapes scrambling toward me as I gasped for light. As I burst into the space beyond, I found myself in another room. But this one was different, saturated in fear, lit with more than just light. The walls didn't feel like they held shadows. They felt alive, and staring back at me were the same grinning faces I had glimpsed in the mirror. My breath caught in my throat. I had escaped one trap, but now I was faced with something worse. I had to run again, but I could already feel them closing in. I turned to flee, but a voice stopped me cold. "You shouldn't have come here." It was chillingly calm, echoing from the very walls around me. I backed away slowly, ready to sprint, knowing the chase had only just begun. I stumbled backward, heart racing and adrenaline flooding my veins. The grim faces in the shadows twisted into ugly grins, whispering words I couldn't quite hear, but the malice dripped from their voices like poison. Panic surged through me as I looked frantically for an escape. The door I had entered through was gone, lost in an ocean of dark, curling shadows. "Don't be afraid," a voice cooed from the darkness, deceptively sweet and filled with treachery. "Stay with us forever. We'll have so much fun." I shook my head, refusing to listen. The stories I'd uncovered, the reports of others who'd vanished in places like this house, they echoed through my mind like a siren call. I had to escape before I became another set of whispers in its walls. I turned to run, scanning the area for any openings. To my left, a faint glow flickered through a jagged crack in the wall. Ignoring the frantic pleas of the shadows behind me, I sprinted toward it. It was a narrow gap, one that seemed to pulse with the promise of daylight just beyond it. The whispers intensified, sounding like a mixture of laughter and rage. I could feel their fingers clawing at my back, desperate to hold me still. I dove through the narrow space, pushing my body past the rough edges of the crack as the darkness tried to clutch at my heels. I felt a chill wash over me, but I didn't stop. If I hesitated, they would pull me back into their eternal night. Emerging on the other side, I tumbled onto a sun-drenched porch. The light was blinding after the oppressive darkness I had escaped. I took deep breaths, filling my lungs with fresh air, grounding myself in the reality of the outside world. The garden was overgrown around the cottage, but that didn't matter. I was free, at least for now. Instinct kicked in, and I scrambled down the steps toward the town, adrenaline propelling me forward as I glanced back at the house. It loomed awkwardly against the bright sky, its windows like grieving eyes, hollow and dark. I shivered, a sense of dread clawing at me. Had I truly escaped? Once I reached the road, I glanced back one last time, but the house seemed normal in the daylight, almost charming, like a fairy tale gone wrong. I pulled out my phone and dialed the police, ready to share my unnerving experience. As I explained the bizarre events, they seemed skeptical, assuring me they'd send someone to investigate. Days passed before they knocked on my door. The officers couldn't find a trace of anything unusual. No signs of forced entry, no strange noises, no whispers. They thought I had experienced a hollow hallucination induced by stress. I couldn't blame them. I was starting to doubt myself too. Ultimately, I packed my belongings and left the cottage. The charm of the house now felt like a deceptive facade. I settled into a new place in town, a safe distance from where I had nearly lost myself. Yet as the clouds drifted over the sun, casting shadows on my windows, I still felt haunted. The whispers lingered at the edges of my thoughts. I wondered if I would ever fully escape the voices, if perhaps what I had found in that house was still seeking me. All the stories I'd unearthed about the previous tenants played in the back of my mind like an unsettling mantra. What truly happened in that cottage? Had I unknowingly joined those whispers that still filled the crevices? I moved on, but the fear transformed into a lingering unease every time I passed by that street. I sometimes think back to that house, the letters and the shadows. I never learned what lay at the center of its darkness, and that uncertainty gnaws at me. The town continues to bustle, but for me, the whispers never truly ended. I guess some mysteries are simply too dark to fully understand.